I think it's really easy for people to be like, oh, I want to be a designer art director, but not really know which path they're headed down. So I would always say that a designer is maybe more technical. Like all of their software skills are like very honed in, detail oriented. They've got a really strong base for aesthetics. Whereas like an art director, I think leans a little bit more into strategy. I think they probably have like stronger curation skills, and they kind of pull the whole picture together a little bit better than maybe a designer would that wants to kind of just like sink into the work and really make one beautiful thing. I think the art director is a little bit of like a magical cat herder that pulls together things from like different departments and makes it really sing in the end.
So why do you think the confusion has been there? Is it because, you know, you might be good at one, but you're asked to do the other, or what do you think it is?
Yeah, I think a lot of designers, I think you can be both, but I think you do have strengths like naturally, inherently, that kind of lean one way or the other. I think sometimes at smaller places, you're asked to do both. You wear multiple hats. I do a lot of the time. And that's great. It's one of the reasons I wanted to come to Native, was to be able to strengthen those muscles across the board instead of just like really diving in on one thing. Which there's a time and a place for that in your career too, but that's just where I was at. I think a lot of it also has to do with the opportunities that you're presented and kind of the way that you choose to curate your career. So if you really find yourself like into the details and really just wanting to sink into a project and kind of work a little bit more solo, I think you gravitate towards that type of work. And I think you kind of come out the other side as a more polished designer, which is a really marketable portfolio. But if you're a little bit more like into team, into collaboration, into how all the pieces fit together, that's a little bit harder to do just on your own. You kind of need an environment in order to pull all those things together. And I think you're attracted to different types of work if that's really where your heart is. So I'm not sure if that totally answers your full question. It's a little complicated.
No, I think that's right. But I'm curious, do you think that people come out of school knowing, oh, I want to be an art director and that's what I'm built for? Or do you think they just like, I like design, and then later on in their career, they realize I'm either moving on to be more curious about something else, or it seems like maybe my strength is something else?
I think art direction is something that you realize you might be good at a couple years into your career. I think everybody that graduates design school with a BFA or ad school or whatnot, I think for the most part thinks they're a designer, and that's not wrong necessarily, but I feel like art direction is something that I've learned more from mentors and from creative directors and from other people that are more established in the industry, like pouring into my career and teaching me how to see and teaching me how to interact with a photographer and teaching me how to interact with other people on our team. And that's not a skill that's really taught in school very well. So I feel like you kind of just have to get out there, see where your strengths are kind of drawing you, and then assess like where you're at and what feels right. I think you hear the word art director and you hear that that's a job that you could have, and you kind of think that that's like maybe the next step for you. But I think it's a very like mystical unicorn path of how you actually get there. And a lot of people get there a really different way. So.
Yeah. And I also think some people say, oh, I'm a designer, but I will move up to art director. And I think that's probably the perception. But to me, it's like saying, I'm going to be a specialist and then I'm going to be a generalist. I consider art director more generalist. And that's not right for everybody.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to continue being a great specialist, right? Org charts kind of make it to where you have to switch gears, and sometimes it ends up being awkward transitions that you don't even want, I think, in some places. But I remember very early on for myself, like I remember where I was sitting when I thought about it. I was like, am I going to be a specialist or a generalist? And I was like, I don't have a choice. Like, I'm a generalist. I can't be a specialist.
Yeah. And I think I'm the same way. I think my strengths lie at like the Venn diagram of art direction and strategy and people. Like, I don't know what that little center circle looks like, but that's where I sing. And if there's a way to like make people feel good and kind of build cross team consensus and collaboration, and it can be super smart and it can be beautiful, and like we can herd all the cats together in the right direction, like I love it. But I'm not I'm not a specialist and I don't really pretend to be. And I'm really okay with that at this point in my career. I haven't always been comfortable saying like, I'm not really great at this one thing. I think I'm really great at art direction, which is a broad category, but not very specific.
Well, I think you're right about that. And kudos to you for figuring that out. I think that takes a lot of people too long to figure out like, oh, this is my spot, or at least this is my spot today too.
Yeah. And it
So
definitely changes. I think that Venn diagram might have like a fourth circle into it, like at some point, or maybe it just stays three. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting. I don't know what that role always looks like and how, you know, those diagrams always like work together. But I know when a project involves like strategy, art direction, and good people, like I'm the happiest.
no, I think that's right. And I think it does change more often for a generalist, because part of being a generalist is I think you just have this curiosity and don't really set boundaries around yourself as much, right? Whereas
Yeah.
specialists are like, I am going to get so good at this one thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it never gets stale for them. They just keep getting, just keep improving at that. That's not me. You know, I'm over here like, what's over here? No, it's this. Oh, I can now
Yeah.
connect this because now I understand these two worlds.
Yeah, I'm very broadly curious. Sometimes thinking into the specifics of things requires like time for my brain to like settle into the activity as opposed to like doing research or doing discovery on things or exploring different styles. Like going wide is really easy for me. Going deep sometimes takes me just a little bit longer. I get there, but it just, you know, that's not how my brain naturally works. So
So from one generalist to another, have you ever set boundaries or guardrails and say, you know, I can't be a jack of all trades. I don't want to dabble in too many things. Do you ever say, I'm going to kind of live in these two camps, or have you ever thought through that before?
I think that's a super interesting question. I know I've definitely felt that way before. Like I could be getting too broad. I could be getting too curious about too many things. And then, you know, always bringing it back to like your portfolio and your experiences and like, what is it you're going to talk about as far as like who you are, what that looks like. Um, I think I'm still at a point where I'm trying to define like what those couple things are, knowing that like skill creep is a thing. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. I think it's something I'm like kind of actively wrestling with. I definitely think you can go too broad. I don't subscribe to the idea that like a designer has to be a coder, has to be an expert in UI, has to, you know, be able to pick out every best paper sample for print production. Like, I think there's a lot of people that are specialists, and I love trusting my team and like trusting that somebody else is going to help me make the best decision as opposed to needing to own all of that knowledge myself. So maybe like in a year when we do these again, ask me again and I'll see what I got.
That's funny. So you've had some interesting gigs before coming to Native. What are some of the things that well, first of all, which one, you know, whether professionally or even before that, what was one of your favorite jobs you had before coming to Native?
Do you want us to like name names on this? Okay.
Don't have
Sorry.
to.
I was like, I don't know how this is getting edited.
That's okay. That's okay. I will tell you that a lot of people pick their high school job more than their professional job.
Yeah.
I would say we're about 50-50 on that.
So, okay, I'll give you two. When I was a kid, like 9 or 10 years old, my grandpa drove charter buses. And one week he drove on the weekend. So he would always like come back to our house on like a Monday or a Tuesday and hang out for a little bit. I was going through a phase where I was very interested in baking, and I like started making cookies, and he always came over, he got cookies. He started kind of posing this idea that if I made cookies for his charter bus route, he would split his tips with me as like a 9-year-old. And I was like, well, that's cool. Like I don't have to pay for ingredients because I'm a child, and like kids don't pay for groceries. And my mom was on board, and I had to make 300 cookies a week and package them all up and have them ready for him on like a Friday before he like left on his run. And he would, honest to God, like split all of his tips with me just as something to do. And at the end of like a summer, I bought a trampoline.
Whoa.
I know, which as a 9-year-old, like in the early 90s was like a big deal. I had like a tent on top of it. I had sleepovers out there. It was amazing. I have no idea what else I did with the rest of my money. I'm sure my parents took it to pay for all these groceries that they were funneling into this cookie job. That was pretty great. I also nannied for a family in high school, And it seemed strange at the time. Like it was like kind of just the job that I fell into. But I learned so much nannying for somebody else and essentially being given way too much responsibility for a 17, 18-year-old. But I learned a ton about running somebody else's household, being responsible, drove their cars everywhere and their children and their friends' kids as friends, all of that stuff. So it definitely had like some very high highs and some low lows those summers, but they make for really great stories that I'd be happy to tell you another time, but it was a good job.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I was talking to the account team, and I think everybody in our account team has done food service, which like
That's
is not
interesting.
surprising. Like they've learned how to deal with the general public and, how to keep people happy and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to hear what other people did when they were like in high school or younger.
Yeah, the parents of the family I nannied for were both kind of CEO level professionals, and they had these like teenage boys that basically needed more of a chauffeur than like a nanny, so to say. And they were very smart, went to a private school, had like a lot of activities going on. And that wasn't the environment that I grew up in at all. So like kind of seeing a peek behind somebody else's life was really interesting. And then as they realized I was like a responsible teenager, like too responsible for my age, they were like, oh, hey, we're going to have like our kitchen renovated this summer and you're going to manage all the contractors. And
Wow.
we have to get our dog trained. So you're going to manage the dog trainer and she's going to come every week. You're going to do this. And on Fridays, I had 5 or 6 signed checks that had to go out to adults that I was like paying to run their household. And then I like essentially reported back at the end of Friday being like, okay, here's the progress of your kitchen renovation. And I hope your dog is trained because I paid that person and your Mercedes got serviced and peace out. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. It was very weird looking back on it, but I can totally see how that translates into my life now.
Knowing how you run video shoots, none of this surprises me that you were basically doing the same thing in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbeknownst
That's
to me that was a thing that I would be doing.
that's so funny.
I planned their vacations every year. I mean, they had like fabulous trips to
Wow.
Greece. Like it was nuts.
But I think when you're a kid and you feel like you're like, I'm doing things that I think adults should be doing, it kind
Mm-hmm.
of makes you think like, I got to figure out, well, first of all, if I like it at all,
Yeah.
is this a career in some way? Like, is this hopeful to me in some way?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too to watch them, both mom and dad in this like executive level position with their career, trying to figure out, what are they doing every day when they leave? And like, how demanding are their careers that like they have to hire me?
Right.
And look at all the stuff that I'm doing that like, shouldn't an adult be doing this? But I guess
Mm-hmm.
they think that I'm that person. And yeah, so I think I've always been a little bit self-reflective, like maybe too much, but I definitely think it's helped me like kind of figure out where I belong or where I feel best. And I know that started like super early from just looking at these people and being like, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
How are you making this happen?
So after college, you spent time in-house. You also
Mm-hmm.
worked at another agency that was very specialized in one industry.
Yep.
Now you're over at Native, a little bit different from those. This third option here is a little bit different. What did you pick up at each of those places?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When I was in-house, it was my first job out of college. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, in-house versus agency. Obviously, like I read on like what that meant, but I don't think that is accurate to like what the experience is. I got placed on a really small team there that was kind of like a jack of all trades team. We did a lot of like specialized interactive experiences. And so one of the things that I really loved from that time was just being able to have all of the resources of an in-house agency at my disposal at a very young age. And I had people around me that had more time on their hands than the agency model traditionally allows. And so I got very fortunate with like 2 to 3 really good mentors that had the time to kind of sink into my career and teach me what it meant to direct a photo shoot in a studio. And they had the time to take me with them when they were going around town to go source props, or they were doing a really quick, half-day shoot, and it wasn't a really big imposition to have a junior kind of assistant person along. So I got a really interesting experience, just out of being able to observe and being able to kind of tag along in a way that I've now learned is uncommon for people to have, especially that young in their career. I thought it was great. I couldn't believe I got paid to do this. And, you know, at a certain time, I kind of realized like what I had, and then I got curious about agency life. So I had a great experience in-house, but then I was ready for something a little bit different. Just wanted to kind of see what agency was all about. So I went to another agency that, like you mentioned, was a lot more specific. Excuse me. So they are a big agency, and they have multiple offices and just kind of run an overall bigger operation with very like large clients. So a lot of what I learned there was how a big client works, how money kind of flows through an agency, how you can fight for the budget that you want to do the project that you want, how to advocate for yourself, and how to work across a lot of different departments. So we had in-house development, we had in-house production, we had motion graphics, we had a lot of assets at our disposal in that regard too. But what I found there is it was really easy to get pigeonholed into just doing one specific thing. So kind of like we were talking about earlier, like if you're not a specialist and you're more of a generalist, it's a little bit harder to kind of advance your career year after year and really feel like you were making meaningful progress and not just kind of working on the same account month after month after month. So I had a really great time there. I learned a ton about that niche industry and also just about the big workings of a big agency. And I love the people that I worked with, but I also believe that people are really easy to love. And I've had really great coworkers everywhere that I've been, including native. So it doesn't take long to kind of sink into really appreciating your coworkers and valuing the environment that you're in.
Yeah, that's cool. So what are some of the things that you're enjoying with native right now?
Yeah, so things I'm enjoying with native right now. So I love production. I love video stuff. Right now I'm working on figuring out what that means in the COVID world. So I've always kind of been attracted to, I don't know, more complicated problems. Like video production's always felt a little like unwieldy to some people, but I really love the way that all the parts kind of fit together and like making the end product really sing. With COVID, it's really different. We're trying to like make sure that all of our sets are really safe. We're trying to coordinate talent from across the US and figure out what that looks like. Trying to keep a client on board and aware of factors and not just weather, not just like regular implications, but global pandemic implications. So it could be daunting, but for me, it's kind of interesting to figure out like, how do we make these plates spin smoothly? How do we keep this all going? How do we kind of move forward in COVID times with a project type that is inevitably going to have to change a little bit based on where we're at. So that's exciting. I love the team that I work on at Native too. I love like random chit chat with all of our copywriters and designers and asking Chris what he's making for dinner and asking Brett what's new in his notebook and just like different things that aren't really big moments to point to. But I do think like it's a lot of those small things that make the environment really special and make your team feel really special to you. So I'll always say team.
Yeah, we had a function recently, and it was ad hops with Ad Club, and they were asking about our culture, and I forget how the question was framed, but they basically asked, about ours. And I said, I'm not going to list a bunch of perks. I mean, we have some perks, but it's the small things
Mm-hmm.
and kind of the feel that we have that I think is most unique. And it's hard to make a bullet point out of that. It's how people kind of treat each other and interact with each other and trust each other and pass each other in the hallway and smile and things like that,
And everybody's responsible for making that. I've been in environments where it's been like, oh, these people create the culture of the work environment. And in my opinion, that's never really that successful. The culture emerges from who the people are and how they want to show up in their work environment and the type of place that they choose they want to work in. So I think we have a really good group of people, like not just in the creative team, but like across the, our company that make that choice every day. And I think that's just what makes it nice.
That's a good point that I don't think I've ever thought of. I've interviewed people before and someone would say, oh, they're a good culture person.
Hmm.
And I've always wondered, like, what's that mean? Does it mean they they just mess around and everybody likes them, or like,
Yeah.
what's that mean?
Yeah.
Uh, but you're right. Like if there's only 2 or 3 people driving the culture, then it means everybody else is kind of just following them along. That's not exactly what we're after.
It's also the culture of 2 or 3 people that are choosing what it is. I think there's the difference between kind of offering environments like that, but also listening to what people are actually interested in. And it might be weird. Like, you have to kind of go with whatever it is the group decides they want to do. Like, that's the culture, whether you like it or not.
Right.
Thankfully, we've got a really good one. And it's really fun. So